Breaking news, the United States Army is reportedly preparing attacks against Iran to break the deadlock in negotiations. The information gained traction in Washington this Thursday, April 30th, 2026, as Donald Trump increases pressure on Tehran. And he maintains a harsh demand against the bloodthirsty Islamic Revolutionary Guard, which has already fully taken over power in Iran. I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but right now, you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well-informed, real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. Milson Alves, the standard of credibility. According to Axios, Trump is expected to receive a presentation from the United States Central Command about new military options against Iran. Reuters also echoed the report and stated that one of the options would be a short and intense wave of attacks, possibly against infrastructure targets, to try to force Tehran back to the negotiating table with more flexibility. The point is simple. Washington wants to break Iranian resistance before the regime uses negotiations to buy time. The pressure comes after stalled talks. Trump, according to American news reports, was not satisfied with the progress of the negotiations. For him, Iran made some progress, but not enough. The phrase repeated by the White House is direct. There will be no deal if Tehran insists on keeping any path to a nuclear weapon. This is the center of the crisis. It's not just a diplomatic dispute. It's a tug of war over limits, power, and security in the Middle East. A heavy military response from the United States Armed Forces could start with a symbolic and strategic target. Karg Island in the Persian Gulf is a vital point for Iran's oil export infrastructure. If Washington understands that the regime is using the negotiations just to buy time, an operation against Karg would be seen as a message, a direct message to Tehran. It wouldn't just be an attack to scare them, it would be an attempt to break the regime's logistical backbone, taking from Iran one of the most sensitive parts of its economy. In this scenario, the message would be clear. Either Iran accepts real limits on its nuclear program, or it starts to lose control over sectors that underpin its own power. The toughest scenario would be a limited ground operation, with American troops entering the island to neutralize military structures, protect strategic points, and prevent Tehran from using Karg as a leverage over the global market. There is still no confirmation that Trump has authorized anything of this scale, but simply preparing military options already changes Iran's calculations. For the regime, the threat is no longer just sanctions, blockades, or rhetoric. It becomes the real risk of seeing American forces seizing an essential area within their own territory. And it is exactly this fear that Washington can use to force Tehran back to the table without arrogance, without blackmail, and without the illusion that it can challenge the United States without paying a high price. The United States has the military potential to turn this threat into something real if Trump decides to take a harder line against Tehran. The presence of 3 American aircraft carriers in the Middle East has brought more than 200 aircraft and about 15,000 military personnel to the region, including sailors and Marines, creating a force capable of attacking, protecting routes, and supporting a limited operation in the Gulf. In addition, Washington maintains a network of bases and military access around Iran, with permanent facilities in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, as well as access agreements in the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. Recent surveys mention more than a dozen American bases and facilities spread throughout the region. In this scenario, a limited invasion of the island would still be an extreme measure, but not impossible from a military standpoint, because American forces are already positioned too close for Tehran to ignore. The Associated Press reported that Tehran offered to end its grip on the Strait of Hormuz if the United States lifted the blockade and ended the war, leaving the nuclear discussion for later. For Trump, accepting this would mean easing the pressure at the wrong time, and allowing the regime to keep postponing the nuclear issue. The Strait of Hormuz turns this dispute into a global problem. This is the immediate cost of the standoff. While Tehran challenges, the world pays more for energy. Even so, Trump is betting that the higher cost will fall on the Iranian regime. The logic is straightforward. If Iran can't export freely, it loses revenue. If it loses revenue, it reduces its ability to finance allies, its security apparatus, and to withstand internal pressure. In the news circulating in Washington, the blockade is presented as a major advantage for the White House. Lifting this pressure now would be giving oxygen to the regime at a time when it's starting to run out of air. Iran is surrounded by a crisis that it helped create itself by resisting real limits on the nuclear front. The most sensitive information is that the military plan doesn't appear on its own. According to Axios, in addition to the possible wave of attacks, other options discussed include seizing part of the Strait of Hormuz to reopen the passage to maritime trade. Reuters also reported this possibility. Another possibility mentioned by the press involves special forces securing part of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile in case there is no agreement. This shows that Washington is working with diplomatic pressure, route control, and nuclear containment at the same time, for real. Even so, precision is necessary. Having military options ready doesn't mean Trump has already ordered attacks. Reuters noted that this kind of planning is part of the standard options within the US military establishment, but the context changes the significance of the report. When the president is dissatisfied, the blockade continues. Hormuz remains tense and oil prices soar. A military display stops seeming routine and becomes a message. Iran's time is running out. The American military presence in the region reinforces this message. CBS News reported that the aircraft carrier strike group is expected to leave the Middle East in the coming days. But it also noted that it was one of 3 aircraft carriers operating in the region. Even with adjustments in naval movements, the American military posture remains strong enough to maintain pressure. The goal is to convince Tehran that refusal comes at a price and that this price can rise quickly. Al Jazeera reported that Iranian sources threatened a practical and unprecedented response if the blockade continues. This kind of statement is meant for domestic consumption and to intimidate abroad, but it also increases the risk of miscalculation. At the center of it all is Trump's decision not to ease up before getting results. He knows that the blockade raises oil prices and also creates pressure within the United States, but his bet is that giving in now would cost more later. If Iran survives the pressure without giving up its nuclear program, Tehran will say it has won. If Trump keeps up the pressure and the regime backs down, Washington shows that it can still impose limits in a region where many have been testing American patience for years. That's why the possible preparation for attacks shouldn't be seen as an isolated case. It's part of a pressure campaign. First, a naval blockade. Then, a refusal to accept Hormuz being open without a nuclear agreement. Now, military plans are on the table. The sequence shows the White House trying to close off the Iranian regime's options. The United States military may be preparing for a new phase against Iran, but the final decision still depends on Trump. And it's precisely Trump, known for always playing offensively, making decisions that no other president of this generation dared to make. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to get even more involved with the Milson Alves community.